Welcome to Salt of the Earth Farm Stories, where the heart of farming comes alive.
You can't go to the shop and buy experience. Every season's different, but over time you'll have seen similar conditions.
Welcome back to Chambers Rosewood Vineyards with Stephen Chambers. In this episode, we dive into picking season, the pace, the pressure, and the different wine varieties coming off these vines. From hand picking to machines and back again. Smoke taint from fires, variable seasons, and fortified wines that are world famous. We also talk about Stephen's dad, Bill Chambers, a legend of the wine industry, and what it really takes to play the long game in wine. And yes, Charlie is back. So picking roughly around February,
Yep.
And then what happens in the months after that?
That's when we start. I said we've got a few grape varieties. Unfortunately, not all grape varieties ripen at the same time. Thank goodness, because otherwise you'd be in a whole world of pain trying to bring everything in at once. So typically your whites ripen first, and then different whites will ripen at different times. So you might have something like Chardonnay, which will ripen at the start. You know, it'll be one of the first ones you pick. So, you know, if you're going to start in the second week of February, that will probably be the one you start with. And then you have something like Roussanne, for example, which is a later white. You might be picking that 2 weeks later at this comparable level of sugar, because it just doesn't ripen at the same time. And then on top of that, your reds can be a little bit later than that. But one of the things that we are finding now is that there has been a little bit of an advancement of the harvest commencement time. So obviously you're going to get an outlier, like for example this year in 23 where it was cooler, where it shunts it back to where people go, oh, it's normal, nothing different. But what will probably still have happened, and probably still will happen, is that the reds are moved. And so the reds, you used to have a time where you do all your whites and you'd sit down and wait for them to ferment, and you'd be nice and relaxed because, your whites is really intensive. You bring them in, you extract the juice out of the grapes and you clean up. And then it's just monitor the ferments and make sure that they're all happy. And then you go, right, we've done the whites, pack them away, let's start the reds. They involve a little bit more work because the colour for your wine obviously comes from the grape skin. There's only a couple of red fleshed grapes where the juice is red as well.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Right. If you peel the grapes, the juice is clear, right? So you get the colour out of the grape skin. So that's why we ferment in contact with the skins.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons, to extract the colour, but also extract tannins and extra flavour. So your reds require more work because you've got the grapes in contact with the juice, and what will happen is the grapes will float on top and create a little sort of like blanket on top of it. So you have the juice underneath fermenting away and you have the grapes on top. And the grapes will dry out over time, you'll get hot spots in the grapes. And you're not getting extraction because the juice is at the bottom, the grapes are on top. So you actually have to try and basically mix those two up. And so that takes more work to do that, and monitoring the temperatures and stuff like that. So what's happening now is, instead of that lovely little break and you sit down and twiddle your thumbs and say we've got plenty of time, is you actually get your last white in. In some cases you've got your white in, at the same time you go, I've got to bring a red in as well. And so gone are the days where you didn't there's more and more overlap now where reds and whites are in at the same time, which creates a little bit more of a
stressful time of the year.
Well, a little bit more of a bottleneck.
Yeah.
Because we already have a lot of equipment we only use for a short period of time. It's the same thing for the croppers. They have their air seeder. They only use it when they're seeding. They have their actual harvest machines to reap it all. And they only use that at that time of the year. Well, wine's the same. We've got, if you mechanically harvest, you've only got the harvest you use then. You've got in the winery, you've got your descender to remove the stalks away. You only use that during your harvest. It sits there vacant. The press to use to extract sits there vacant. And you go, well, I need a fermentation vessel. I don't need, I do 20 ferments, but I don't need 20 fermentation vessels. I can get away with 5, and it's just a case of rotating through. And you go, well, out of those 5, I could use 1 for a white, or maybe 2 for a white, because that'll be done before the red comes in. But if you've got 2 with white in it, and you've got 5 reds that want to come in, you've got a problem.
Yeah, and you can't really arrange this 4 weeks out, can you? Because you don't know when.
No, we can't arrange it. If you get something like 2016 where we went from, well, we've got plenty of time to we have no time, it's a logistical exercise in juggling everything.
So do you hand pick it all?
We handpick now, and this year is definitely a year to do it too. Now that we've got smoke.
Yeah, you'll do both though, mechanical and...
No. So we handpicked up until 2005, and the view was always if we could get pickers, we'd handpick. But then by 2005, it had become cost prohibitive, partly because as the millennium drought came through, we're getting less and less yield, but just it cost just too much. And some days we'd have a football team picking for us. The other days we'd be lucky if we had half a netball team. You know, so it's a bit hard when you go from 18 to 7. It's pretty hard because it just makes too much, problem. But so we then went mechanically for quite a few years, and then in 2023, well, with the exception of 2020, we handpicked because of the smoke. And in 23, with the year being so cool and we had a lot of very uneven ripening, you could go out there and have a look at a red bunch, and some of the grapes were red and some of them were still green. And so we went and selected out in the vineyard what to pick. And since that time, we stayed on hand harvesting because you get less of the non-grape material in there.
Yeah.
I think one of our 21 Muscats got a little bit of a green character from it because it got some stalks from a weed in there, which was very herbaceous. And so we're removing those taint issues. With smoke, they recommend you try and not break the berries down when you're prior to processing, and process them cool. Remove the stalks from them and stuff like that. Any sources where the smoke might be absorbed, you want to try and eliminate that as much as you possibly can. And going out mechanically harvesting, what will happen is a lot of those grapes will get broken up. You have the juice, and the juice will leach out those compounds.
So does every season make you nervous?
Yeah, but for different reasons. Different reasons. You can't go to the shop and buy experience. So every season's different, but over time you'll have seen similar conditions.
Yeah, okay. What's the hardest part of farming people never see?
All the work.
Yeah.
All the work.
Like I phoned you the other day and you were doing night shift. You were working through the night.
And that's the thing, people, they understand your work, but they don't also understand you're there all the time. And even if you're not there, you're there. I think that's probably the biggest thing, that they don't understand that you've got all these considerations. If you're a straight out farmer and you've got stock, you're worried about the stock because on a hot day you've got to go out there and make sure they're watered. If they're calving or lambing, you've got to make sure that they're okay. So there's all that consideration in terms of the wine. There's always stuff going on. You've got to go out there and make sure. When I first started the industry, the general thought was, January is a good time for winemakers to take a break because there's generally not so much going on. It's pretty benign. You should have everything wrapped up, and you've got a bit of time to come back in late January and just go through the vineyards and crank on. Well, nowadays with the way things have become, because it just, you get a storm cell or get something else, you virtually can't go. You've got to, more and more of the winemakers aren't going anywhere.
Now, mate, you've once said it's more about what's in the bottle rather than the showmanship. Tell me about that.
Well, I mean, anybody can be a show pony. Anybody can say, look at me. But the proof in the pudding later on is if somebody comes and buys your bottle, do you want them to remember how good a show person you are, or do you want them to enjoy the product?
Well, I enjoy your product, mate, and you know that.
Yeah, but so it's much better off to be the second and let the product sell itself rather than you trying to sell the product.
And your fortified wines, these are pretty famous, but not just in Australia?
No, we were very fortunate. Look, the region itself was very, very fortunate. I mean, we've had a long-standing reputation, and people think, the more recent history talks about the masters of wine in the 1980s coming here and highlighting the quality of the Muscats back then. But I suppose if you can go back even further than that and see that that All Saints had done exceedingly well in the London wine competitions back in the early around 1900, and that tells you that at that time they were as a region making very good wines. And of course, one of the things that put it on the map locally was merchants came up here and managed to secure some of the older fortified barrels out of the region here and bringing them back to Melbourne. They're going, where's this come from? So, it's not just a recent phenomenon. It's been a long time, but we the thing that people don't realise, if we were still out there pushing that, maintaining that quality, it's still seen as, oh, well, such and such used to be known for that. They used to be known for this. It's not just they used to be known, they still are.
I remember having dinner at your uncle's place, I think it was around in the late 90s, and it was a pretty fancy dinner for a young bloke. And he brought out, after dessert, I think it was an 1890 Muscat.
Oh, is that where it went?
We had a teaspoonful each. It was just like syrup. It was amazing.
And that's what can happen, actually. It's like the slow reduction. We actually got a cask. No, the casks here are not so great. But yeah, over time they'll concentrate up and thicken up and become more intense. And if you ever want to get diabetes, start having that really intense bloody syrupy stuff, because it's packed full of sugar. Because we're talking about wines where, as a young wine, they'll have like 250 grams per litre of sugar, which is, getting up there a bit. But these things, which are virtually like a molasses syrup sort of thing, like they virtually don't pour. We used to put in glasses and people used to have to dip their finger in it to get it out. And then you had the spoon, you would have to lick the spoon to get it off.
We did.
You wouldn't be surprised if there's sort of like 700-800 with the amount of sugar that would have come with, just because you've lost all the liquid in there and it just concentrated it up.
So what's harder to make, table wine or fortified?
That's a good question. They're both hard to make in their own ways. So table wine's hard because you've got to deal with the vagaries every year. And, you have to be so much more on the ferment itself and what happened, and the decisions in the vineyard for both of them affect them. But, you have to be on the game for that fermentation point, right? But, for whites, they might be, if you get good fruit and you get a nice happy ferment, that's maybe a little bit easier to maintain. Reds, a little bit trickier. Fortifieds, they are harder in the longer term because you're aging them a lot longer. But they're also, they're in the winery a little bit quicker and out a little bit quicker in terms of finished wine. But when they're there, you've got to keep an eye on them, because it's actually not so much about the fermentation kinetics, which is what you're looking at for the table wine side. Make sure that the yeast is nice and happy and you get the aromatics that come through and you don't have any issues with sulfides or other issues because the yeast hasn't got under stress. And making sure that, for reds or your malolactic, which is an acid fermentation, occurs. For fortifieds, it's about the sugar. And you've got a point at which you want to stop everything. And it's about managing that. And the thing is, these things are, once they get going, they're almost hard to stop. They're like a train. And so you have an intense period where you are working very, very hard. Whereas a red, you can say, I'm a bit tired, I'll do that tomorrow morning. So there's difficulties in both. You can gloss over with the fortified because you're multi-vintage, but we age them for a hell of a lot longer.
Yeah.
So, but they both have difficulties. I wouldn't say anything's easier than the other. The flip side is, though, that if everybody has a bad vintage, you can get a bit of a leave pass with table wines, but you don't get that leave pass with the fortified because you're doing that multi-vintage.
Yeah, you definitely got to be on your game. So do you taste wine yourself differently now than you did, say, 20, 30 years ago?
Oh, well, of course you do. You've got no choice. You change yourself anyway. I mean, you always, probably you assess a little bit differently, but that comes with experience as well. As you taste more, you get more of a library in your palate, effectively. And so you hopefully can identify it. But the flip side to it, as you get older, you can also get a bit duller.
Yeah, okay.
Too. So you might become a bit desensitized to things. It gives and takes.
Do you still get surprises?
Yeah, hopefully not too many nasty ones.
And I used to love coming in here and seeing your dad. He would be here most days. And you always felt so appreciated when you purchased some wine, and it kind of felt like it was his first sale for the month, He just appreciated every customer. And yet he was still working here at the cellar door right up into his 80s.
Yeah, so he actually stopped. He transitioned from being here most of the time. He, to be honest with you, was more of a frustrated farmer. He would have preferred to be a farmer, I think, first, and that's because he could go and sit behind his sheep and read a book at the same time. With wine, you've got to put that book down and talk to people. He did like to talk, but if he could read a book, he'd read a book. And he was still doing the cellar door on the weekends up until 2019-20. So he started to back. He was starting to struggle, but we didn't realise this exactly at the time, but he actually had developed prostate cancer. It hadn't been diagnosed when he was still doing cellar doors, but he was obviously in a bit of pain, and that was obviously distracting him. And there was numerous stories about that time about them coming in, people having to wake him up because he'd fallen asleep. But then again, why wouldn't you if you only have two people all day? And you have one first thing in the morning or one person at 2 o'clock. You've got plenty of time to have a snooze, And so he was still doing it. And of course, it was actually probably, I did December 19 into 20 when we started having the smoke. And he would come down a little bits and pieces then. He'd sort of not been coming down as regularly by that time. And like I said, it was probably because he was in a lot of pain. And then, of course, when COVID came along and they said those who have got pre-existing medical conditions and over a certain age, and data, all the lists that they put out at that time, limit your interaction with the general public. Well, that was him. He ticked pretty much all those boxes. And so he was quite happy he understood. He was sort of quite happy not to do it. And then later on that year he got diagnosed with the prostate cancer, but they were able to, give him some radiation treatment and stuff like that. But he was still doing it into his 80s.
And sadly, we lost him just a few years ago.
Yeah. December 23, he passed away at 90, almost 90 in 6 months, I would say. Yeah, just over.
And did your mum play a part in the winery too?
Right. Now this is the complicated factor. So most people talk about mum as Wendy Chambers, and that's actually not my mum. My mum is Catherine Chambers, who passed away in 86. Basically, she used to run the farm side. She came off a farm in Benalla, and she basically did the sheep, and that's why we ended up with the foal Dorsets, actually, because it was her and her sister who bred the horns out of those particular Dorsets, and they brought them up here. So she used to do that side, and Dad would do more of the wine side and go show judging and stuff like that. And then 89, he married Wendy, and Wendy was a force of nature to be reckoned with, that's for sure. And she really, between her and Don Chambers, that's Bill's one of his younger brothers, they set about to actually, sort of reinvigorate the winery in terms of increase the profile. And Wendy had quite a few contacts, and so that's when that sort of thing took off a little bit more, and more winery focus was on there. Bill still wanted to do his farming though.
And I actually remember doing a shoot out here, I think it would be in the late 90s, and I met your grandmother.
Yep, Peggy. So that was one person I missed in that whole thing. So mother farm, dad winemaking, my grandmother did the books. So she was actually the one who did all the invoicing and stuff like that for many years. And then he used to have other people in, used to do the bottling and labelling and stuff like that. She was a remarkable woman. So, like I said, my dad had prostate cancer. What I omitted on saying, he decided that that wasn't enough, that he would be involved inadvertently in a car accident. It was fortuitous in some respects, but also bad in others. So that car accident meant that he actually cracked one of his vertebrae in half, his C3. And so that's right up the top. So he was in a collar for a long time while that healed. He also stripped one of the arteries that supplied blood to the brain.
Horrible.
But it happened at a time he needed cancer treatment and the border was closed. And so he was sitting in the Albury Base Hospital going through rehab, and they could just wheel him down to the cancer centre and give him his treatment. So
Right.
So it was a pretty drastic way to get admitted to hospital, but yeah, he lived to 90. He actually got home after that accident, which was, a miracle in itself. Well, my grandmother, she actually had both her legs amputated when she was like 70, in her 70s and 80s.
Peggy?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, poor circulation. So she, like the first time she used to make lots of jams and marmalades and sell them through the cellar door. And the first time she had the first leg amputated, within 2 days she was already up there at the rehab making more marmalade.
Oh, God.
So
Trooper. Now, your dad, he was a legend in the wine industry, and he travelled the world judging.
he didn't necessarily travel the world judging as such. He travelled Australia, did a lot of the Australian show circuits. He pretty much did every single show. And he was the chair of Melbourne for over 20 years, and he'd been judging there at least 30, I would say. An example of how his palate was, I've got 2 examples of how his palate was. One of them was when they had the Rutherland Wine Show, which is an open show, which now incorporates the Australian Fortified Wine Show. They have a vignerons dinner on where the local wine makers come and they have dinner with the judges who are actually doing the work at the show. We all bring wines masked. And at that time, somebody bought the Fortified, and he was sitting there, and I wasn't on the table, but the person who was sitting next door to him said, he just quietly leant over to him and he said, "That's a 1945 Stonyfield, right? This is just about the wine they were currently trying." And indeed it was, because he'd seen that wine through his judging so many times, even after all those years, he could pick it, right? He had a fantastic memory like that. And then another incident was when we were really, really wet in 2011, which he'd never, he said, I've never seen it this wet. That was the first time he gave us permission to leave grapes on the vine. Prior to that, we had to pick everything. And he said, the way this is looking, this will be like 1956. And I said, "Oh, did you make wine in 56? He said, "No, I was still at Rosewood at the time. I didn't do that vintage." But he said, "I saw them in the shows." He said, "You could pick every single one that came out of the vintage because of the character that they showed."
Wow. So that was 2011. That was after a long drought.
Yeah, well,
Heavy
we
rain.
were talking about Huey before.
Yeah.
Huey turned the tap on in 2010 and didn't turn it off.
There you go. What's the most common thing visitors say when they walk in here? Where's Bill?
No, it depends on whether they know us or not. Whether they've been here before or not, because most of them talk about how they like the welcoming nature of the cellar door. That's the main thing. And for those who are familiar to us, they say, you've still kept that. There's the odd one, like I said before, who aren't so appreciative of maybe the stalls, but most people say you still haven't, still kept that look, and it looks, really, quite nice. But we're finding now there's an awful lot of people who are coming through the region who first time visitors, and they know nothing about the region. They happen to be calling through, and they might be coming from Sydney on the way to Melbourne, or for whatever reason they come through. They might even have no idea that we're selling fortifieds on the other side of the world. They know nothing. They just come in with a clean slate. So they are probably ones that they say, it's just a nice, comfortable, relaxed atmosphere.
Do Aussies drink wine differently to overseas visitors?
No.
Do we perhaps like a heavier wine?
No, but their palates are different because of what their exposure is. We don't drink it differently, but their palates are different.
Yeah.
So they might be a little bit more open or tolerant of some wines which might have a little bit more characteristic to them than maybe what some of the Australians are because of what they're exposed to. But overall, they're just as open to trying everything else as what the Australians are. Where it doesn't matter where you are. Look, coming to a cellar door, so people who come to cellar doors are already one step along their wine process. Obviously, there's always going to be within some big group some people who drag through because they're coming with somebody else and they've got no choice. They've come to a cellar door, but they'd prefer to be in a brewery or a distillery. So they're going to be a little bit to one side. But in the main, if you've gone out of your way to go to a cellar door, you've already got sort of a desire to discover something new. Sometimes some of them are still a bit closed, but you can use but you've come to cellar door. You're already wanting to investigate something. So why don't you give something out of the ordinary to try?
Perfect. And they get an education as well. Do people buy wine to cellar now, or are they mostly ready to drink it?
A lot more people are doing the drink now, a little bit more of that mentality. They're so used to that going down to the bottle shops. And it doesn't matter whether it's the big chain ones or the smaller ones. It's the buy now, drink now sort of mentality. So they're not necessarily doing that. There's probably not as many multiple sales as what we would have been in the past. But that's an education thing too. If anybody's really getting serious about wine and they want to go about the aging, and they might look at the tasting notes and say, drink now to 2040. They go, I'll buy one bottle. I said, well, why are you only buying one bottle? Are you going to age that? Oh, yeah, I'll put it away. I said, well, you probably need to buy more than one, because what you should be doing is trying, and this is part of the education process. If they're interested, you should buy a few so you can actually drink it over the period of time to see its evolution. And you decide yourself when you think it's drinking right.
Yeah.
It might get to 2040, but it might not. It might be best at 2035.
Yeah.
But if you've only got one bottle and leave it to 2040,
That's right.
you can't find that out.
Yeah. What excites you about the future of the wine industry?
At the moment, well, look, the fact that people still want to get into it, for all the press that's out there in terms of no and low and wine oversupply and declining consumption and everything else that's going on, there's still people who want to get into it and explore and improve. You need that youthful injection, because as we get older, we get slower, we get more fixed in our ways and less likely to take risks because we just don't. It's just a course of nature. And it's interesting, if you're looking at, in businesses which might be handed down or across, or, the longevity part of it, there's also if the heir apparent has been identified, the other thing they tend to do is they sit on their hands and go, oh, wait until such and such comes back, because they'll want to do it their own way. So nothing gets done.
Yeah.
And everything sort of sits there. And that sometimes can be to the detriment of the business.
And I've heard you say these are honest wines that show a sense of place. And I have to agree with that. What would you love the next generation to understand?
It won't happen overnight.
That's farming.
Well, it's anything. Unfortunately, we are so much nowadays, it doesn't matter what part of the life you're in, it's all about the immediate fix. That's probably the tricky part, is that good things come to those who won't, but we seem to have been losing that. It's good things come to those who can grab it now.
Yeah,
seems to be
right.
the mentality.
Yeah. Now, how do people order wine, or can they order wine online?
Yeah, of course they can. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We this is an example. We're talking about you stay still. Bill didn't believe in computers. If we could have been, he might have even taken us back to the chisel and the stone tablet. But the reality is, you had to computerise. You had to go on the web, and of course, if you hadn't have been on the web in 2020, you wouldn't be here, because you wouldn't have survived all the closes.
That's right. So your website?
Yeah, so it's www.chambersrosewood.com.au.
Thank you. Now, mate, we're up to the fun part. These are
for you.
Yes, for me.
For you.
The off-the-wall questions. If wine could talk, which barrel at Chambers would have the best stories?
It might be the small one tucked in the corner, which just probably has the least love. Why you leave me over here? Look at me.
Kept in the dark.
That's right, like a mushroom.
Now, if you weren't a winemaker, what would you be doing?
Well, that's a tricky one, because, when you've been in a role for so long, or been in the industry so long, it's hard to divorce yourself out from what you might be doing. You go, oh, well, maybe if I hadn't have joined this, I might have, done a chemical engineer or something like that, something else. But if I wasn't doing it now, if I all of a sudden got told tomorrow, guess what, the wine industry doesn't exist, you've got to go and find something else, maybe I'd just become a farmer and still take that big gamble. But I don't know whether I want to be a farmer, because that's even a bigger gamble than being a winemaker. Because farming, you only have a couple of times in the year where you have a great big cash injection, and then the rest of the time it's out. So maybe I'd just become a cycling guide or something like that, or a bicycle mechanical,
Which wine best describes your personality?
Oh, just have to be a prickling one, wouldn't it? Look, I'd probably think the Muscat, because it's a damn hard one to make. Yeah, it always leaves you waiting. If it's done right, it's okay, but if it's done ordinary, you just never know what you're going to get. So, and that's the fortified version. So, yeah, like the vine itself is pretty prickly. It's pretty hard to deal with. So,
yeah. Now, your favourite tool?
Look, I don't have one particular favourite, to be honest, because it really does depend on what I'm actually doing at the time.
Yeah. And what's the strangest thing you've ever been asked at the cellar door?
Do you have beer on tap?
Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
Oh. If someone buried a bottle today and opened it in 100 years' time, what do you hope they'd say?
In 100 years' time, they might not even know what alcohol is. You'd be hoping to say, wow, regardless, wow in one shape or form. Wow, bad, wow, good. Wow, what the hell is this?
What would your great-grandfather say if he walked into the winery today?
What are you doing this for?
Now, if you could give your 18-year-old self some advice, what would it be?
There's a few pieces of advice I'd give myself. Maybe do a little bit more work. Yeah, really consider what you're doing right now, sort of thing. So, yeah, it's hard to say exactly what I'd tell myself, apart from stop being an idiot.
Now, if you could live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Look, everybody answers those, gets asked those questions, and most people say, the other side of the world. It's not too bad here, to be honest with you. It's pretty good. The location's pretty good. But if I couldn't live here because of something, maybe Spain, around the top of Portugal there. So we'd duck down to Portugal and have some port and stay in Spain and have some seafood and white, So,
nice.
I don't think I could handle sitting under a coconut tree on a desert island.
No, I can't see you doing that either. Well, mate, this is an absolute privilege to have this chat with you this morning, and it's always a pleasure for me to come here, and it's still my favourite winery. So, mate, thank you so much for your time this morning and this education that we've had.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for asking me to be part of this.
Thanks, mate. And thank you to Charlie.
Yeah, with his running commentary in the back. Where are you going now? Oh, so he just said bye. He must know we've got to finish up.
Good things come to those who wait. That idea runs right through this place, the wines, the seasons, and the people behind them. Please follow us on your favourite podcast platform and even leave us a review. Thanks for joining us once again at Chambers Rosewood Vineyards. And Charlie sends his regards.